Completing the square, part 2. Last time we were completing the square and we did not have to use where a is 1, but this time we are going to. Remember, we're taking it from standard form, it has no parentheses in it, and we're going to put it in vertex form, which gives us the vertex, which is the opposite of C, comma D, and also gives us all these attributes about a quadratic. So given this first problem right here, first of all we have to make a 1. Before we do that, remember a is 3, b is negative 12, and c is 27. And that 3 is multiplying by x squared, so in order to make this 3 become a 1, I'm going to divide everybody by a. That's really what we're doing. We're dividing by a always. So when I divide by a, I get x squared is left, 3 divided by 3 is 1, negative 12x divided by 3 is negative 4x, and 27 divided by 3 is 9, and it's going to equal 0. So now we're back to the same steps we had before, where we're going to get c on its own side. So we will subtract 9. So we have x squared minus 4x, leave a space, equals negative 9. We're going to take a half of b, so a half of negative 4 is negative 2. We're going to square that, so negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4. Add to both sides, so I also have to add it over here. We're going to write it in factored form, so I have to show x minus and square it. And negative 9 plus 4 is negative 5. So the first step was different because we had to divide out 3. Now since we did step 1, we have to do this step 7. We're going to multiply both sides by a. So what I did is I divided by 3 so I could work this simple problem that I'm used to doing. But I can't just divide by 3 and be finished. What I took out, I am required to put back in. So I'm multiplying everybody by what I divided by at the very beginning. So at the very beginning I divided by a, so it was 1 and I could work this problem quickly. But when I'm finished, before I move my number over, which is the last step, I have to multiply by what I divided by. So that is 3 times x minus 2 squared. Do not multiply through. PEMDAS again says parentheses, nothing to do. Exponent, so I'd have to FOIL this out, which would become this problem right here, and then I'd multiply by 3, which gets me back to the beginning. I am not looking to do that. We're putting it in vertex form, and vertex form has a parenthesis. So just show 3 times my factor. Over here, negative 5 times 3 is negative 15. And now I'm ready for the last step, which asks me to move c, this guy back over with the factor, so I'm going to add 15. Again, 15 does not go with 3, it's multiplying, and it does not go with the factor, so that is 3 times x minus 2 squared plus 15 equals 0. That's a vertex form. Notice I have A, I have C, and I have D. And the vertex, sometimes they will ask you for that. In this case, opposite of C, so it's 2, comma D, which is 15. So my vertex is 2, 15. So we're going to go through this process again with this problem right here that you can see. My first step is to divide by a. I'm making a1 by dividing. Now really you're also dividing 0 by 2, but 0 divided by anything is still just 0. So that's why that doesn't matter. This is going to leave me with x squared minus 10x, and 24 divided by 2 would be 12. So I've made a1. Now I'm supposed to get c onto its own side. So that means I'm going to subtract 12 to both sides. So I've got x squared minus 10x, leave space, equal to a negative 12. Then I'm going to take a half of b, so a half of negative 10 is negative 5, square it, so that's going to be positive 25 that I add to both sides. And I need to write in factored form, so I've got x minus 5 squared. Again, this FOILed out will get me this trinomial right here. And 25 minus 12 is 13. So don't forget, I have to do step 7 because I did step 1. So I divided at the beginning, so now I'm going to have to multiply here at the end. The entire equation gets multiplied by 2 because I divided it out, so I got to multiply it back in. 2 does not multiply by the factor. This is A, this is C. We want to keep them separate. And 13 times 2 is 26. And so my very, very last step here is to subtract 26 back over to the factored side. So I have 2 times x minus 5 squared minus 26 equals 0. If they were to ask me for my vertex, it's going to be the opposite of C, comma D. And D is negative 26. So I've got one more I'm going to show you, just because what if everybody is not divisible and becomes a whole number? So we need to be able to work that. So we're going to work this problem right here that I have on the paper. That is a negative 3, by the way. Is negative 3x squared. So my first step in making A1, I always divide by what A is. So I'm going to divide by a negative 3. And really to 0 too. This is going to stay 0. Negative divided by a negative is always a positive. If you're unsure, please use your calculator. 24 divided by negative 3 is negative 8x. And then I've got negative 43. I'm going to show you what happens. So we've got negative 43 divided by negative 3. You are not allowed to give a decimal that repeats, but it is positive. So you have to hit math on your calculator. It's on the far left. And that says fraction, so we hit enter. We'll hit enter again. And it tells me that it's 43 over 3. So I'm going to have to work with a fraction. It is not that big of a deal. So that is the first step. We have made A1. Now I need to get C onto its own side. So I'm going to subtract 43 over 3 to both sides. So I've got x squared minus 8x, leave space, equals negative 43 over 3. So far, still not that bad. Next step says that we are to take 1/2 of b. So a half of negative 8 is negative 4. I'm going to square that. So negative 4 times negative 4 is positive 16. And I'm going to add it to both sides. I'm going to write in factored form, so I've got x minus 4 squared. This part, this is why we have a calculator. If you type it in with alpha y equals and actually get the fraction, so we've got negative 43 over 3 plus 16, it's going to give you a fraction back as an answer. Or you can do negative 43 divided by 3 in parentheses plus 16. It's going to give you a decimal, which is fine because all you got to do is hit the math, enter for fraction, and enter again. You notice I get the same answer. So it doesn't matter which way you go. Make sure your fraction is either in parentheses or you did alpha y equals to use that guy. So I've got a positive 5/3. So for right now, I'm going to leave that alone. And I'm going to look back over here. I've written it in factored form. I'm going to multiply both sides by a. In this case, what I divided out was a -3 at the beginning. So when I multiply, both sides get a -3 back. Both sides are getting -3 because it's what I divided by. Again, this side, do not distribute. You've got A and you've got C. Over here, you've got 5/3, so you can do alpha y equals, I want 5/3, and I'm going to multiply it by a -3. And that tells me that it is -5. So the fraction only hung on for just a second. It wasn't that big a deal, and now it's gone again. And my last step is to move C back to the side with the factor. And I would be adding 5 to both sides. So I'm going to say plus 5 equals 0. And that is with a fraction. Don't forget that the vertex here is the opposite of C, so 4, D, 5. And that is completing the square when A is not already 1.